I'm sorry, I was on mute. I'm probably going to stay off screen most of this. So, and I might even be repeating some things that I've already covered with you. I'm not 100% sure where we stop, but I will do the best I can with this. Okay. So looking at the text, it looks like we stopped at attachment, or that's what I have in my notes, even though I think I've covered this, but whatever. Okay, from a psychosocial developmental perspective, using Erik Erikson's theory, he's the theorist that gave us psychosocial development. There are specific chronological times, where children need to form relationships, as it says here, interact with others. And I'm gonna close this, and understand and manage their feelings. This is known as attachment. Now, our textbook seems to give Harlow, Bowlby, and Ainsworth the credit for this particular theoretical premise, but the person that is most noted for it is Mary Ainsworth. Okay. Harlow has the experiment with monkeys that went to the monkey that was, let me see. Let me actually show you his experiment rather than trying to explain it.
Let me show you a monkey raised on a nursing wire mother. Now, here are 106's two mothers. As you can see, it was weaned on a wire mother. Here's baby 106. Watch. He's going to the wire mother. He's got to eat to live. Oh, he's going back. He's back on the cloth mother, and he'll stay on the cloth mother. Actually, this baby spends 17 to 18 hours a day on the cloth mother, less than 1 hour a day on the wire mother. We had predicted the variable of contact comfort would be a variable of measurable importance, but we were unprepared to find that it completely overwhelmed and overshadowed all other variables, including those of nursing.
Frankly, Doctor, if it comes to a choice between wire and cloth, it's reasonable to expect that any child go to the cloth. It's a matter of creature comfort, like a baby with its blanket. But is this really love?
Well, what do you mean by saying that a baby loves its mother? Certainly, one thing we mean is that it gets a great feeling of security in the presence of the mother. Now, Mr. Collingwood, wouldn't you say that if you frightened a baby, that it went running to its mother, was comforted, and then all the fear disappeared and was replaced by a complete sense of security, that baby loved its mother? Now, in this experiment, this is the apparatus we use.
That looks diabolical.
That's just the way the baby monkey feels about it. Flashing eyes, loud sound.
Now, I'm not going to go through the entire video, but of course, you're more than welcome to do so. But the point that's being made here is that there's more to the mother-child bond than nourishment, that the feelings of comfort and security are the critical components to maternal-infant bonding. So in this stage of development that Erikson calls psychosocial development, it is very important to note that mistrust is something that must be resolved. And mistrust is beyond just nourishment, but the baby needs, infants need that kind of comfort and security that comes with holding and kindling. There's also John Bowlby, and Bowlby developed the concept of the attachment theory, as he talks about affectional bond or a tie that an infant forms with their mother. They have what's called a secure base need or necessity. And it says, as a parental presence that gives a child a sense of safety as the child explores their environment. Now, what Ainsworth found was Bowlby thought that attachment was an all or nothing process, but Ainsworth found that if children differ in the ways that they bond, then here is some of the answers that she came up with, which is known as the strange situation. Okay, so I'm going to go back here and pull up Mary Ainsworth's strange situation. Okay, now this is what was found in Mary Ainsworth's work. Okay, I think I will grab this one here.
This experiment, which I want through a two-way mirror, is designed to gauge how secure is the crucial relationship between mother and child.
Now, note that the chronological age for this child is most likely beyond 1 year. So this child, assuming, has already established trust versus mistrust, and now is in the psychosocial developmental stage of autonomy versus shame and doubt.
Has been established in studies that would watch a child and then follow it up and interview about the relationships to their parents when they were 21 years old. We're quite confident in the long-term significance of this relationship.
After several minutes play, the mother is signaled to leave the room. The key moment in the experiment is the child's reaction to her mother's return.
An important clue is when the baby's able to become calmed down by the contact with the mother back to play. Sometimes it takes a couple of minutes. You see, when the mother was out, she was only interested in the mother, no interest in the toys. Now she's in contact with the mother. She's beginning to show a little interest in the environment, and shortly she'll be going back with the toys for the story.
So you would call this a secure moment?
Yes.
Certainly much happier.
Goes to the door following her. Now, we sent the mother right back in. The point here is not to distress the baby. We're just trying to challenge it. The baby puts her hands to her face, a sad expression, her face down. When she picks her up, she keeps her head down, her arms out, and then she sits in the chair holding the baby. The baby's still sullen. He's low key.
So you would call this insecure
Yes,
attachment?
insecure. He's avoidant. He's not engaging her, and it's not the reunion's not effective. It's important to remember here that the thing that upset him was her absence. Her return should be the solution to his problem. This is another pattern that we see in babies who are not good at using their mother as a secure base at home. This baby is also insecure. But you'll see, we got a look at his play before the separation. Mother's left. When she returns, she picks him up. He can't calm down. He's still upset. She offers a toy to amuse him or to comfort him or to distract him, and he slaps it away. She offers another, he slaps it away. He's angry. We call these babies resistant or ambivalent because they both want her back and yet can't use the contact. We think that the difficulty is that in the past, when he sought comfort, she's been inconsistent as to whether she's available and responsive or not.
Now, the point of this is understanding from a psychosocial perspective, what is it that a baby needs or person needs in order to have good psychosocial development? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to come back to me. I'm sitting in a place that I'm typically not sitting when I'm addressing you all. So it's important to understand this. And the reason being is this next perspective in psychology, which is self-concept. Attachment is the main psychosocial milestone for infancy. The primary psychosocial milestone of childhood overall is a sense of self. One's self-concept is the work from a psychological, social standpoint for children before they enter the school age years, which is 7 to 11. Now, this is an experiment that's conducted known as the mirror test that demonstrates how humans and few other species is considered the evidence of self-recognition. So children from the ages of 2 to 4 display a great increase in social behavior once they have established their self-concept. But they first have to be able to do that. Now that requires a lot of understanding. When I say that, I'm trying to get I thought they would have the video available. Understanding of oneself. So now you're connected enough from a introspective point of view to where you now feel you can venture out in the world. And the main identifiers of that is parenting style. Diana Brahman is the theorist that gave us parenting styles concept. And there are 4 parenting styles. There is the authoritative, the authoritarian, permissive, and uninvolved. The authoritative is the parent who expects obedience. The parent who does not really engage the child in decision-making with things that deal with the child, but they believe that they're the ones that are supposed to set the rules. The authoritative parent is the one who does include the child in decision-making and even rules, but does maintain boundaries and a sense of behavioral expectations that allows the child not to be harmed in the social environment because the child has learned that there are boundaries for themselves and by others. The other extreme of the authoritarian parent who insists on obedience is the permissive parent, who has very few demands on the child. And basically the child gets to choose things that they are not yet completely equipped from a cognitive standpoint to make those kinds of decisions. The one parenting style that tends to show the most unhealthy children mentally is the uninvolved parent. They're indifferent and uninvolved. They don't really respond to the needs of the child. They don't show up for events that the child has in school. They don't really give the child feedback when they're in the room. The parent is very involved in the tasks of parenting, cooking, washing dishes, and not really stopping to give much attention to the child. That is known as the uninvolved parent. They provide for the child's basic needs, but very little from an emotional cognitive standpoint. As parenting styles, as it says here, influence childhood adjustment, The child's temperament also influences parenting. When we say temperament, we're talking about inner traits that influence one's behavior. We say that children have different types of temperament. There is the easy child. There is the child who is considered slow to warm up, or there is the difficult child. Depending on the child's temperament, which we think is actually a hereditary trait, but it's hard to really define or to make a concrete example, not example, but a concrete frame of reference for temperament, because how do you measure a person's traits that are emotional? But we believe it is inherited, and that depending on the child's temperament, can also verify or validate the parenting style that the caregiver displays. There's a stage where you all are, which is adolescence. Lots of countries do not have adolescence. It's a period of development that begins at puberty and ends as a person emerges adulthood. In the United States, as it says, adolescence is seen as a time to develop independence from parents while remaining connected to them. So you all are still living in your parents' homes. Well, most of you, I'm not sure of everybody, but you are not considered a legal adult. So you still are relying on some assistance, some care from parents, even though a lot of the social things that you're involved in are not with parents. There's a lot that goes on as far as physical development. Again, I'm pretty sure I covered this, but I wanted to be sure. And they are called adrenarche and gonarche. And that's the physical changes that happens in puberty. The primary changes are directly related to reproduction, whereas the secondary are just physical signs. I'm sorry, everybody, I'm really tired. Are just physical signs that the primary characteristics are developing. As we move on, which I've talked about at great length, how the brain continues to grow into the mid-20s, emerging or young adulthood, and that it is the part of the brain where people subside in risk-taking behaviors and emotional outbursts, because those are the two characteristics of adolescence: risk-taking behaviors and emotional outbursts, which is why people in that age range still need parental advising or parental care. Okay, this is the neuroscientist Jay Geed, but I'm a big proponent also of the wiring of the adolescent brain by Dan Siegel. So let's take a look at this.
The sun is up, and inside the O'Donnell's house, they are trying to get Charlie up.
Child? Child?
Pam tries,
Come on. No.
and then Charles Sr.
Charles.
Oh, leave alone. All right. Get out. I want to sleep.
All right. Time to get up. I'll give you 10 minutes.
Well, he's a very friendly person. He's very outgoing. He's very well liked outside the house. It's almost like a different kid than he is at home, because they don't get the attitude that we get.
It was nice of your mother to cook breakfast for you this morning. Say thank you.
Yes, I did, Dad.
It's good. Did I?
For so long to actually look inside the biology of teen behavior has been very elusive. Just haven't had the technology or the tools to try to peer into the so-called black box.
What he discovered in the all-important part of the brain that sits behind the forehead, in an area called the frontal cortex, was an unexpected growth spurt, an overproduction of cells just before puberty.
This is a process that we knew happened in the womb, maybe even the first 18 months of life. I think the most surprising thing has been how much the teen brain is changing. By age 6, the brain's already 95% of its adult size. But the gray matter, or thinking part of the brain, continues to thicken
as the brain cells grow extra connections, much like a tree growing extra branches, twigs, and roots.
Want me to hold it right there?
Yes.
Right there is perfect.
Our leading hypothesis is the use it or lose it principle. Those cells and connections that are used will survive and flourish. Those cells and connections that are not used will wither and die. Part of the brain that is the so-called CEO, or the executive of the brain, is still being built during the teenage years. Teens are capable of enormous intellectual and artistic accomplishments. But that basic part of the brain that gives us strategies and organizing and perhaps warns us of potential consequences isn't fully on board yet.
The risks of a severe concussion or a turned ankle, for instance. An adult brain might call for a helmet here or suggest this is not quite the moment to take a drag. Nikki lives with her mother and 2 brothers.
Upsy daisy, come on.
Her mother, Gail, knows the turbulence of the teenage years.
I know her moods. I know when something is bothering her. I know when she feels she doesn't want to talk. And I know when there's a time to just leave her alone. And I also know when there's a time to find out what's bothering her ASAP. I sort of have to feel her out. I give you those. Sometimes I just don't feel like talking. She knows. She knows this. But like, are you feeling angry inside, confused? What? And that's what she wants. I don't even know. Sometimes I don't even know. Sometimes she doesn't know. She doesn't even know why I'm upset. I'm just upset. She comes to me sometimes. She says, "Mom, I feel like crying." So I sit down, put her in my hands, and let her cry.
Dr. Deborah Yergelin Todd and her associate Stacy Gruber are scanning the brains of teenagers to see how they read emotion, mapping differences between the brains of adults and teens. To explore this, Todd put teenage and adult volunteers through an MRI and monitored how their brains responded to a series of pictures. All the adults identified this emotion as fear, but the teenagers invariably saw something different.
Tell me about those faces. What were those faces feeling?
A lot of them are shocked or angry, and I think that was it.
Okay, shocked and angry.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
They see anger when there isn't anger, or sadness when there isn't sadness, in terms of interactions at the dinner table or on the weekend or doing chores or doing homework. It means that whatever communication, whatever conversation you had with them, if you're assuming they understood everything you said, they may not have, or they may have understood it differently.
Charlie O'Donnell regards his mom as a good sport, but he's still continuously battling for more independence.
I'm gonna go to the Air Force after high school. And then I'll get my college paid for, then go to college. Doesn't really matter where. I just want to get out of the house. I want to live in a dorm. No parents' rules. I have to set them for myself.
Okay, hold on, everybody.
The sun is up, and inside the O'Donnell's house, they are trying to get Charlie up.
Child? Child?
Pam tries.
Okay, hold on, everybody. I changed position. So I didn't mean to start the video over again. But this is an example how some of you might actually act. And it's important for you to understand it's not necessarily characteristic of one's, the way they mean to be. It has a lot to do with what's going on with the brain during adolescence. The next section in the book talks about cognitive development. And these are very important things to model so that it is taught during this stage of development, because it's the last time the human brain is being formed for these things, or what they do not learn will be pruned. When we talk about cognitive development, we're talking about complex thinking abilities. Piaget talks about this as formal operational thought. He's the theorist that studied cognition during childhood. And formal operational thought, as it says here, teen thinking is also characterized by the ability to have multiple points of view. Imagine hypothetical situations, debate ideas and opinions, and form new ideas. In addition, it's not common for adolescents to question authority or challenge established societal rules. This is also lined up with Lawrence Kohlberg's moral stages of development, which discusses that a person is in conventional moral development during the adolescent years, which means that they will line up with the societal norm. What's the societal norm for them is not necessarily the macrocosm, but the microcosm, their immediate environment, what goes on at school, what goes on in the extracurricular activities that they're involved in. Whatever is the behavior or the societal norm of those groups that they are engaged with, that is what's considered for them their norm. So it's very important of who you're associating with during adolescence, because that will have a lot to do with how you go into the next developmental psychosocial stage, which is young adulthood, and thereby what we call intimacy versus isolation. A very important thing that must be developed during adolescence is cognitive empathy, okay? Which is where you solve problems and you learn how to conflict avoid. How you solve problems or avoid conflict is very important, because again, that's what you take into your adult years, okay? I'm going to use the 45th as an example. I personally, and I will take responsibility that this is a personal opinion from my observation from a distance, because clearly I wasn't one of his aides or whatever, but from a distance, I think this person did not develop cognitive empathy, okay? And so this component of how to solve problems, avoid conflict, this guy has no sense from my observation of avoiding conflict. He actually stimulates conflict. He seems to thrive on conflict. The way he addresses people in his political gatherings, and the people that are there, they too relate to that, because they also did not develop cognitive empathy. This is a concept known as the theory of mind, and it's one's ability to take the perspective of others and feel the concern for others. I literally was driving down a road yesterday to take my grandson to the basketball practice. And there was a big Confederate flag and it said F-U-C-K Biden. Now, this guy's the president of the United States of America. In some countries, you'd be arrested for that. In the Republic of China, you'd be arrested for that. In the Soviet Republic of Russia, you'd be arrested for that. You'd lose your life by denigrating the political leader. But when you lack the cognitive capacity to feel for others or have concern for others, look at others' perspectives and at least agree to disagree, you don't have the mental capacity to do so. So this is important to develop during during adolescence, because if you don't, you will go through adulthood as a person who lacks cognitive empathy. From a psychosocial developmental stage, we are at identity versus role confusion. If one doesn't identify with something or someone for their self-concept, then they feel isolated. Okay, I'm sorry, not isolated. Then they will have role confusion. They don't know if they're coming or going. They go with any crowd. They're trying to find out what and who to identify with. And that's part of the job of being an adolescent. From adolescence, we have emerging adulthood, also known as young adulthood, which is about the age of 18 on into mid-20s. And there's an interesting phenomenon that's occurring right now in the United States because of the economic burden of inflation. A lot of young adults are extending this developmental stage into their early 20s because they simply cannot afford to reach out and be intimate. Intimacy is how I like to look at intimacy, because they're still forming their identity. And most of that because of the financial constraints of moving out and buying property or starting a family or starting a business or really engaging into one's career. So these are some of the things that we are seeing research taking place so that the textbooks will be framed differently in the next 10 years because of these experiences. Okay. From young adulthood, we have solid middle adulthood. We are definitely adults after we have reached mid-20s or definitely mid-30s. As far as physical development in adulthood, in the 20s to early 50s, our physical maturation is complete. Once we reach early adulthood, we're not going to get any taller. We might get wider, but we're not going to get any taller. Our physical maturation is not only complete, but the only thing that might continue slightly is our height and our weight. Physical adulthood, physical prowess or abilities are at their peak as far as muscle strength, reaction time, sensory abilities, cardiac functioning, things of that nature. As we approach our 40s to the 60s, we call that middle adulthood. There is some physical decline, especially if the decisions that people make are not focusing on their physical capabilities. The decline will be even quickened. Something I also want to note here, and I mentioned it when we did the chapter on memory, is dementia, which are the symptoms of the disease Alzheimer's, doesn't begin when you see the prevalence of the symptoms manifest themselves. Dementia you see after Alzheimer's has taken place. And that we don't have a reversal for it at this point, but it can be slowed down. It doesn't even have to express itself, but that's completely upon the lifestyle choices that one makes in young and middle adulthood as to whether or not they will have the prevalence of this disease, Alzheimer's. And it's, you know, we're getting more and more people living longer, but the quality of life is challenged because of the lifestyle choices that were made prior to reaching the stage of late adulthood that now you're laden with on a day-to-day basis in late adulthood. So right now as adolescents, as you become young adults, be mindful that living, you're going to have to live with a body that compromised maybe your mental health or physical health. And things are going to happen anyway. Like it says here, hair begins to thin and turn gray. That's happening to me. Okay. And I'm pretty conscientious about my physical health and mental health. So these are things that are going to happen as you age. There's late adulthood, which is 60s onward. It's the last stage of physical change. The skin will lose elasticity, reaction times will slow down, muscle strength will diminish, things like smell, taste, hearing, and vision, all of the senses that are so sharp in the 20s begin to decline. My husband actually had 20/15 vision when he played professional sports, and now he needs glasses. He needs to wear glasses to read, which is kind of interesting. I don't need glasses to read, but I do need them for looking far away. I'm what's called nearsighted. And so when we go to the restaurant, I read the menu and he tells me what's going on in the restaurant. We kind of use each other's strengths when it comes to vision. This is interesting though, as it says, aging doesn't mean a person can't explore new pursuits, learn new skills, and continue to grow. Just because you age doesn't mean you have to go into this stage of decrepitude. So let's take a look at this.
So my name is Neil Anthony Unger, and my goals for my skateboarding are to continue to literally research the quietness of my mind and how quiet it can become and how joyful that is. When I first discovered skateboarding, I thought, oh my God, I want to do this. There's something about it that feels so, it quiets the brain, the mind, it turns the thinking off. And I love that. Oh, here's what I wanted to share about skateboarding. I am actually a beginner. I'm a beginner. I cannot do all the basic tricks. I can do maybe 10 to 20% of the basic skateboarding tricks. And my goals for myself are to strengthen my muscles by giving myself energy in whatever way my self can figure out how to do that. And so what else can I say about being old and skateboarding? It's just, it's so fun. And I can apply what I learned about the mind and the creative process, and then take that to other areas of my life, like my friendships and my family, and my changing my bad habits. One of the main reasons why I wanted to skate, to show people that this is possible, that it's possible to be strong, it's possible to be in good condition, and to continue to be creative. And of course, so my main goals are just to be continuing to be able to skateboard on a daily basis, because it's a platform where I can experience the most interesting parts of my mind and then apply that to other areas of my life. I just want to continue to see how healthy can I get, how young can I get, how old can I look and yet still act young.
Okay, hopefully that's encouraging as you are adolescents, that again, just because you age doesn't mean you have to go into decrepitude. That's my motto. As far as developing cognitively as you go into adulthood, it says that adult cognitive development is complex because it's ever-changing process, but it can be even more active than in infancy and early childhood, which are the ages of from birth 0 all the way up through age 7. People think that's because the brain is growing in size at such exponential speed that is where most of our cognitive development occurs. But as you age, you will find out that the middle-aged brain is pretty powerful. So again, all this is in your text, but let's go ahead and let's venture into it. Middle-aged brains.
Next story should be reassuring. New research shows that we actually get wiser as we get older, and that brain drain doesn't really start until our early 70s. NJN News health and medical correspondent Sarah Lee Kessler has the story.
The Seattle Longitudinal Study has been following 6,000 people for 5 decades, looking at what happens to intelligence as we get older. Dr. Joseph Landolfi, a neurologist at JFK Medical Center in Edison, says the study shows that unless we have a disease that targets the brain, middle-aged people stay pretty sharp. Cognitive decline does not begin in our 40s, 50s, even early 60s.
The study showed that it actually occurs much later than that, in our 70s. which is nice because it really means that the 60s are the new 40s.
In fact, when it came to cognitive tests, most people in the Seattle study did better in their 40s and 50s than they did when they were in their 20s, although younger people had the edge when it came to speed and reflexes.
We seem to be a little bit better at deductive reasoning and spatial skills.
The study doesn't explain why, but one theory is that with age, the brain is less susceptible to dopamine, the pleasure hormone that causes impulsivity, making the middle-aged brain better at decision-making.
Why might we be sharper at this age? Quite frankly, it could be life experience.
Dr. Karen Marks, a behavioral neurologist at JFK, says the study is important because it emphasizes a lot of things people can do to preserve brain function,
such as eating well, having social contacts, exercise, and it shows that that has an effect on our ability to think, to process, that carries on through middle age.
My reaction was, wow, it's nice to see that, but how come I'm having so many senior moments?
Dr. Landolfi suggests no matter how old we are, that we continue to exercise our minds, whether at work or at projects around the house. Sarah Lee Kessler, NJN News, Edison.
Okay, yet again, here's something that kind of defies what we typically hear about aging, is that, you know, you get old, you're going to lose your memory, you lose your physical capabilities. Well, one of the biggest reasons we lose that stuff is because we don't use it. As we proceed, we see that the textbook takes us into the psychosocial development of aging, and it talks about there are many theories, as it says here, about social and emotional aspects, of aging. There is the social emotional selectivity theory that talks about our social support and friendships that dwindle in number, but the ones we have remain very close. I currently have, I'm sorry, I'll open this. I currently have friends from high school, and we actually have come together and started doing a Zoom group. We started off with once a month, and we found it so enjoyable that now we do it twice a month, and we're going to do it the day after Thanksgiving. And what's interesting is because we knew each other in high school, as you all are high schoolers, and how much of us has changed from a cognitive standpoint, from a psychosocial standpoint, from a psychosexual standpoint, all of these different things, from a moral standpoint, and how much of us has remained the same. And it's a really good reminder of our capacities, because if you don't continue something that, say, you loved or were very good at after high school, these people remind you, hey, well, you were really good at that. Or a friend of mine, she's had several surgeries, but she was like a champion bowler, and she had stopped bowling. And she realized, wow, this was something I really love. So she took it back up, and she was telling us how she now is doing yoga to kind of assist in her body being able to do the things that are necessary to be good at bowling. So it's important to have this kind of engagement as you age. Okay, so try not to burn bridges with one another as adolescents, because the social emotional selectivity theory says you begin to really connect to people, and you're more selective with your friends, not just, you know, anybody, but you're very selective. And it's necessary because the social support is one of the factors that maintains good mental health as you age. Okay. And I'm going to show you this one because this is kind of funny. When I Am Old by Jenny Joseph. Okay. When I am an old woman, I shall wear purple with a red hat that doesn't go and doesn't suit me. And I shall spend my pension on brandy and summer gloves and satin sandals and say we've no money for butter. I shall sit down on the pavement when I am tired and gobble up samples in shops and press alarm bells and run my stick along the public railings and make up for the sobriety of my youth I shall go out in my slippers in the rain and pick the flowers in other people's gardens and learn to spit. You can wear terrible shirts and grow more fat and eat 3 pounds of sausages at a go, or only bread and pickle for a week, and hoard pens and pencils and beer mats and things and boxes. But now we must have clothes to keep us dry, pay our rent and not swear in the street, and set a good example for the children. We will have friends to dinner and read the papers, and maybe I ought to practice a little now, so people who know me are not too shocked and surprised when suddenly I am old and start to wear purple. Basically, as we age, you'll find that a lot of people stop caring so much what other people think and start caring more about what you think and feel. That's another emotional, cognitive explanation as people age, because they begin to realize, hey, I don't have as much life left as I've lived. I need to really live it. Here's another about aging in America. And again, these are all in your text.
Aging in America means to me it's a time for freedom, time for fun, time for refinement.
I don't know about Ray, but I appreciate life more every day. Well, after 65, you can ski for a discount and you can go midweek.
I learned that the more I do, the more I want to do.
People are living much longer and able to be active much longer.
To me, aging in America means to be able to work for as long as I want to have meaningful relationships with my friends and family, to be able to give back to society, and to be as independent as possible.
Aging in America means to me that we stop thinking about older people as older people. We just start thinking about them as people. No matter how young or how old, they still have dreams. They still have experiences that they want to share. That never ends.
I think that we're seeing older adults working beyond retirement. Many of them into new careers. They're traveling, they're volunteering, they're staying very, very engaged in life.
I'm very lucky to be an older American now.
Now, again, a lot of you probably won't look at this, but if you're interested, you can. And it will assist you theoretically with some of the extra credits that are available in this particular chapter, not just Facing Death, but some of the other ones that progress onto that. One of the major theorists that studied in this particular phase of life is someone who, as it says here in 1967, the reality began to change with Cicely Saunders. What reality? And that is that death is accepted as a natural part of life and is embraced. Dilos de los Marcos is an example of how a culture has embraced and accepted that particular phase of life, which is death, and accepted it. And this person, Cicely Saunders, actually created something known as hospice. It started off in the UK, and hospice is a way to provide death with dignity. And so pain management was handled in a much more humane and comfortable environment. And then this person, Florence Wald, founded the first hospice in the United States. It provides over 1.65 million Americans and their families the ability to have someone die in a comfortable, informal environment. If you're in a hospital that has a hospice unit, that means that you've been diagnosed terminally ill. The doctors have taken their hands off and said, There's nothing else that we can prescribe or do. And the next big event in your life will be death. And people will face it with the ability to, like they make sure that the rooms are much more decorated, not the standard hospital room by room, but the rooms are decorated and painted differently, that people can have 24-hour visitation, that people have televisions that give you the capacity to choose many, many different channels of what you want to see. You also participate with other hospice people in the hospice unit, so that you're not isolated and you're socializing. And from this concept of hospice, we have someone who gave us a theory known as death and dying. And that person is Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. She worked with the people who started hospice care, and she proposed these 5 stages of, let me make this bigger. Whoa, I didn't mean for it to be that big, of death and dying, known as denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. These are the stages that most people will go through, and not necessarily in that order, but it's part of the grieving process. What we have found also very interesting is that you can use this same stage, 5 stages, for not just actual physical death, but the death of a relationship. If you go through a divorce, or the death of a career, or the death of maybe a business, anything that has stopped and you have to create a new normal, these 5 stages of grief of that is very helpful to help people get through to a point of acceptance. Okay. It says, whether due to illness or old age, not everyone facing death or the loss of a loved one experiencing the negative emotions that Kubler-Ross talks about. For example, there's some research that says that religious or spiritual beliefs are even a better way to cope with death because of the hope of an afterlife and the social support that comes from the association of religious or spiritual confidants or people. I just had a friend last Monday, which you all probably know because that's why I stopped the video last week, because I've traveled out of town, and one of my friends in my circle of friends lost her husband, and they were married almost 50 years. They have a special needs son that they shared taking care of, and he died suddenly. It wasn't, he was ill over a period of time, but he had a massive heart attack at work. And now she's faced with all the stages of grief, and she's in denial. She says, I can't believe it. I talked to her yesterday, and she says, I walked into the room and I was actually angry that Mike wasn't answering me back. Like she was calling out to him saying, Mike, so-and-so and so-and-so. And she was angry because she felt he was ignoring her. And then it hit her, oh, he's not here anymore. This is part of grieving. So that's a very poignant example of how a person first is in denial. Then they go through anger, which she will experience, where she'll be upset that he's no longer here, that he's been taken away from her, whatever, however she lands on that. And then from that stage, we find people bargain, and to kind of bargain away the pain. If I maybe keep my house cleaner, will it be easier for me to deal with this feeling I have of missing my loved one who's no longer here, being left behind? Unfortunately, the next stage after that is depression. And unfortunately, a lot of people stay there the longest. They can get stuck there. And that's anger turning inward, especially when a person has lost a child. Because the cultural moray is that you die and leave your children versus your children die and leave you behind to have to create a new normal. And that kind of depression is not positive mentally or physically or emotionally or cognitively, all those things. And you try to help people get to a point of acceptance. Say if the death and dying situation is a divorce. Some people can be divorced 20, 30 years and still not accept that they're no longer in that relationship and move on. They keep referring back to the moments they had in the relationship that they might have enjoyed or that they might have really bonded with. But it's time to move on, and so that you can form new experiences and new relationships. This is Randy Pauch. He gave a very endearing and insightful speech. He was diagnosed with cancer, and he left this behind for his family so that they would be able to reach acceptance in a much more rapid and a much more peaceful state. So let's take a look at Randy Pauch's. This is just part of his TED Talk, or his last lecture, as he calls it. Okay. We're just going to look at a moment of it. First of all, he was given this standing ovation for the mere fact that he would even do such a thing. So because this is so long, if you do decide to look at it and can correlate, you know, one of the theories that we just discussed, like Kubler-Ross, you will get credit for it. But I don't actually have it as an extra credit assignment because I don't just want to focus on death as part of lifespan. I already have one in there that deals with some of the legal, I'll say, the legal aberrations that are connected with death, like living wills and DNR. I forget the term that it's called, where you notarize DNR, do not resuscitate, and all that kind of thing. I thought that was more important to have as the extra credit assignment rather than Randy Pauch's speak. However, I will get a shorter version. His last lecture. He doesn't have a lot of short versions. Here we go. We'll grab this one. I'll grab this one because it's the shortest.
Facing your mortality is really a gift, and it can be the biggest motivator to start to live your life now and remain present in the now. Randy was on the show to share his insights on appreciating life, and what's really more important, from his famous and last lecture, a lecture that's been watched by more than 13 million people on YouTube.
So I'm reprising a talk that I gave in September at Carnegie Mellon University. There's an academic tradition called the last lecture. Hypothetically, if you knew you were going to die and you had one last lecture, what would you say to your students? Well, for me, there's an elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room is that for me, it wasn't hypothetical. I've been fighting pancreatic cancer. It has now come back after surgery, chemotherapy, and radiation. And the doctors tell me there's nothing more to do and I have months to live. I have 3 little kids. Let's be clear, this stinks. But I can't do anything about the fact that I'm going to die. I'm pursuing medical treatments, but I pretty much know how this movie's going to end. And I can't control the cards I'm dealt, just how I play the hands. Now, if I'm not morose enough for you, I'm sorry to disappoint, but I don't choose to be an object of pity. And in fact, although I'm going to die soon, I'm actually physically very strong. In fact, I'm probably physically stronger than most of the people in this audience. Yeah. So today's talk is not about death. It's about life and how to live, specifically about childhood dreams and about how you can try to achieve them. Probably the most wonderful thing my parents did was they let me paint my bedroom. I said one day, I want to paint stuff on the walls. And they said, okay. But the great thing is that they let me do it. And they felt that letting me express my creativity was more important than the pristine nature of the walls. And I was really blessed to have parents who saw it that way. My parents taught me about the importance of people versus things. So when I got older and I bought my first car and I was so excited, I had this shiny new convertible. This is my niece and nephew, Christopher and Laura. And every month I'd take them for a weekend. So my sister and her husband would get a little break and we go off on adventures. And I just showed up with my new car and my sister's explaining to Chris and Laura, that's Uncle Randy's new car. You can't get it dirty, da-da-da-da-da. And they're just cracking up laughing because over her shoulder, I'm casually opening a can of soda and just emptying it on the back seat. And they come running over. My sister says, what are you doing? And I said, it's a thing. It's just a thing. And I'm really glad I did that because at the end of the weekend, as I was driving them home, little Chris had the flu and he threw up all over the back seat of my car. And I don't care how much value you get out of owning a nice, shiny, pristine thing. It's not as good as I felt knowing that I made an 8-year-old boy not feel guilty just because he'd had the flu. Next thing, you better decide early on if you're a Tigger or an Eeyore. Tiggers are energetic, they're optimistic, they're curious, they're enthusiastic, and they have fun. And never, ever underestimate the importance of having fun. I am dying soon, and I am choosing to have fun today, tomorrow, and every other day I have left.
Professor Randy Pausch lost his battle with pancreatic cancer in 2008.
So this concludes our lifespan chapter. There's a lot of other stuff in here, but hopefully you were able to really get something from this that will improve your lifespan development as you are adolescents and you have so much life to look forward to and so many contributions to make. And I'm sure you're very excited about being such bright students at the Orthopedic Medical Magnet School. We talk about you all the time, how bright your population of students are. And we have a lot of faith in your future abilities and how much you will impact the world. And hopefully I will be able to see all of you on Tuesday and have a great rest of the day.